Welcome, dear friends. You're on the channel, and this is your daily briefing from the Ukrainian front. Today's episode is packed. Advances on multiple directions, the capture of the first city in 2026, a massive strike on Ukrainian infrastructure, an assassination attempt on Trump, and some uncomfortable truths for the American defense industry. So get comfortable. We'll break it all down in order, no fluff, no spin. But before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now and make sure you hit that bell button. It's the only reliable way to guarantee you get notified about new episodes because YouTube's algorithms treat military content in a rather peculiar way. They don't always deliver what subscribers actually need to see. And a very special thank you to our sponsors and everyone who supports the channel financially. You understand perfectly well that YouTube is actively fighting this kind of content, and without your support, working in this format would simply be impossible. Every contribution, every donation is a real investment in keeping this channel running. Thank you for that. It genuinely means a great deal. Now then, let's get to work. We start from the north, as is our good tradition, and move south. Kharkiv region. Vovchansk sector, a significant breakthrough. The north grouping continues to demonstrate impressive activity. April has been an unusually productive month for them. Almost every single day brings either an advance in Sumy region or in Kharkiv region within their area of responsibility. This time they delivered on the Vovchansk sector, and delivered in a meaningful way. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces advanced along a front more than 5.5 kilometers wide. The maximum depth of advance reached approximately 4.5 kilometers. The result? The village of Boshkov secured under Russian control. Looking at the map, on the eastern flank, in a woodland area, a minor positional adjustment was recorded. The AFU reclaimed approximately 1.5 square kilometers. But in the context of the overall result, this is utterly negligible. The Russian side gained more than 15 square kilometers of territory. The ratio is 10-1. The loss in the woodland is nothing more than a statistical rounding error, and the fate of that area is already obvious. In the near future, it will pass under Russian control along with the surrounding districts. It's important to understand what has been happening in this sector since the fall of Vovchansky Khutori. The AFU's defense has been crumbling all along the line, and this despite the fact that Ukrainian command urgently redeployed additional forces here from the Kupansk sector. That redeployment slowed the pace of Russian advance somewhat, but it was not enough to fundamentally reverse the situation. Russian forces now have the prospect of sequentially taking several populated localities: Pokalyan, Volokovka, Chaykivka, Okremivka, and Karaichne. Okremivka deserves particular attention. Russian fighters have already entered it. According to available information, fighting for the settlement is ongoing, and it is quite possible that it too will come under full control in the near future. Kupansk and Lyman, a grinding stalemate. No significant changes were recorded on the Kupansk sector over the past 24 hours. The picture on the Lyman direction is identical. Frankly, that situation has been stagnating for about 2 months now. No breakthroughs, no serious advances. Russian forces there are, as they say, bogged down. The key to unlocking this sector is the physical severing of the southern supply route. But that is precisely where progress remains minimal. Information had previously emerged about the capture of Brusivka, however sources directly on the ground did not confirm those reports. Russian forces have therefore still not closed up to the road itself, which is significantly constraining the entire Lyman sector. Until that knot is cut, there is no reason to expect serious changes there. Kramatorsk direction, the siege of Ryoleksandrivka. Titans. This is a completely different story. Russian forces have reached the Siverskaya-Donetsk-Donbass Canal in the area of Malinivka. Just yesterday, this was operational information. Today, mappers have officially confirmed it and marked it on the map. What does this mean in practical terms? It is both simple and extremely serious for the AFU garrison in Ryoleksandrivka. Russian fighters have taken control of the road junction leading from the southwest to the settlement. 3 out of 4 roads to Ryoleksandrivka are now under Russian control. The AFU has one remaining supply route, from the direction of Mykolaiivka. And even calling it a proper route is generous. Every approach is under fire and monitored by Russian drone operators. It is effectively a death road, and every column moving along it risks destruction. The denouement is drawing closer with each passing day. The forecast for Ryoleksandrivka: by early summer, the Russian army should be able to complete its squeeze on this settlement. Yes, the AFU will cling to it with everything they have. It is a strategically vital point, and Ukrainian command understands perfectly well that once it is lost, pressure will shift directly onto Mykolaiv. But their resources for a full-scale defense are dwindling. By the most optimistic calculations, the situation should resolve in Russia's favor before midsummer, which means that by autumn, a push towards Slavyansk becomes entirely realistic. This is a medium-term prospect, of course, but it is becoming increasingly credible. Constantinovka. Direction: Illanka on the brink. The south grouping continues its methodical squeeze on Illanka. The pace is not lightning fast, but it is steady and relentless. Over the past 24 hours, another 3 streets and an industrial zone passed under Russian control. The AFU now control no more than 20% of the settlement. The remaining 80% belongs to the Russian army. The fate of Illanka is, for all practical purposes, sealed. It is impossible to hold that tiny remaining foothold for long. The Ukrainian fighters there will either be destroyed or forced to withdraw under the threat of complete encirclement. But far more important are the strategic consequences of what is unfolding. Once Illanka is fully taken, a significant portion of Constantinovka will find itself in a deep semi-encirclement. This is clearly visible on the map. Pressure on the city will come from 3 directions simultaneously. The AFU will find themselves in an extremely uncomfortable position. With the front configured as it is, holding urban defenses becomes a task on the very edge of what is feasible. It is telling that even Ukrainian analysts and sources are acknowledging it. Russian infantry is infiltrating the southern part of Constantinovka more and more actively, consolidating in multi-story buildings and houses in the private residential sector. Dislodging infantry that has entrenched itself within urban infrastructure requires an enormous number of troops. And troops are precisely what the AFU is catastrophically short of right now. The logic of what is happening is transparent. Infiltration will continue, forces will accumulate, and at a certain point, critical mass will be reached, after which the city will begin to peel away, slowly at first, then rapidly. The estimated timeline for the capture of Constantinovka: July to August 2026. Dobrovilske direction. The first city of 2026, and now the main story of the past 24 hours. The city of BILETSKE has passed under Russian control. No official announcement has been made yet. Mappers have not colored it red on the map. But the information comes from a source that has not failed once. The city has been taken. BILETSKE is the first city captured in 2026, and it is a landmark event. What happens next? Together with Ryoleksandrivka, which was taken earlier, this frees up a significant portion of the forces that had been tied down in the assault on these settlements. Those forces can now be redirected directly toward Dobrovilske, the next major strategic objective on this axis. But it is important to be honest about what lies ahead. Dobrovilske is a completely different proposition. The city is heavily fortified, with multiple echelon defense lines, an extensive network of strongpoints, and 2 spoil heaps, known locally as terraconi, that give the defenders significant tactical advantage. There will be no easy walk here. That must be acknowledged plainly. Russian command, judging by the developing operational situation, may be considering a bypass maneuver around the city. The eastern flank is already partially formed. The western flank is in the process of being shaped. If both flanks close, Dobrovilske risks finding itself in operational encirclement, which would fundamentally shift the balance of forces even without a direct frontal assault. We are watching this closely. The territorial tally for the past 24 hours, excluding BILETSKE, for which there is still no official confirmation, stands at 1 populated locality taken and 18.5 square kilometers of territory. For April, that is a very solid result. The AFU, over the same period, managed to advance approximately 1.5 square kilometers. Assassination attempt. American political chaos deepens. We turn now to events outside the Ukrainian theater of operations, events that nonetheless directly affect the broader geopolitical picture. Washington has seen another assassination attempt on the President of the United States. At the traditional White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Hilton Hotel, a 31-year-old resident of Torrance, California, Cole Thomas Allen, attempted to force his way through to Trump. Armed with a shotgun and a pistol, he broke through the perimeter of Secret Service agents, managed to fire a shot at one of them, and was only then seized and neutralized. At the time of the incident, Trump, Melania, and Vice President J.D. Vance were all present at the dinner. The profile of the attacker is itself a revealing story. On paper, Allen was a self-employed video game developer and educator. More remarkably, in 2024, he was named Teacher of the Month across the entire Los Angeles County School District. A man with no visible criminal history, no connections to organized extremist networks, and yet prepared to attempt the assassination of a sitting president. This speaks more eloquently than any sociological survey about how deeply radicalization has penetrated American society. This is now at least the fourth assassination attempt against Trump in recent years. And it is important to understand, each such incident is not merely a statistic, it is an indicator of systemic crisis within American society. The level of political violence is rising across the board. During the 2024 electoral cycle, candidates spent 5 times more on private security than they did in 2016. Everything suggests that by the next electoral cycle, that figure will rise further still. As for the geopolitical context, this latest attempt is unlikely to significantly impact Trump's already declining approval ratings. The more important question is the state of the American political system as a whole. Republicans risk losing the midterm congressional elections, and if that happens, Trump will de facto become a lame duck president, unable to implement his agenda, including any moves toward a Ukrainian settlement. Democrats, having regained control of Congress, will block any initiative aimed at reducing support for Kyiv. This, in turn, effectively closes the door on peace negotiations until at least the 2028 presidential election. Massive strike on Ukrainian infrastructure. Over the past 24 hours, the Russian armed forces carried out a massive strike across Ukrainian territory. 47 missiles and 619 drones were deployed, a strike comparable in scale to the most destructive attacks of last year. The primary targets were energy supply, logistics, and fuel supply infrastructure. In Dnipropetrovsk, fuel cisterns were destroyed, a commodity in desperately short supply on the Ukrainian side, with local media reporting a massive fire in the industrial zone. In the BILETSKE area, a large-scale fire broke out after the strike, and city authorities declared restrictions. In Kharkiv, an electrical substation was destroyed. In Sumy, strikes on substations and warehouses. In Odessa and surrounding areas, energy infrastructure and port facilities were hit. The strikes covered the north, center, east, and south of the country simultaneously, which strips away the ability to concentrate air defense assets on any single axis. The state of Ukraine's air defense system deserves particular attention. According to available information, Kyiv has exhausted its missile stockpile for the Patriot air defense systems. Indirect confirmation comes from the official statistics of Ukrainian air defense crews. In the intercept reports, the column for ballistic Iskander missiles shot down shows the figure 0. Ukrainian sources explain this by saying that the Patriot, the only complex genuinely capable of working against ballistic threats, has either fully depleted its ammunition load or has been placed under the strictest conservation regime for critical scenarios only. If this information is accurate, and there is no shortage of indirect confirmation, the consequences for Ukraine will be very serious. We are talking about the virtual defenselessness of critical infrastructure against ballistic strikes. The prospect of the winter of 2026-2027 for the Ukrainian side looks considerably grimmer than previous heating seasons. There is neither the money nor the components to restore even 40% of the already destroyed facilities. In parallel, Odessa is sending signals of social tension of a different kind. Local youth have begun physically obstructing the activities of Territorial Center of Conscription personnel during forced mobilization attempts. There have been recorded cases of teenagers rescuing men from TCC representatives. This is a fundamentally new trend. Previously, resistance to mobilization was predominantly individual in character. Now, collective solidarity is beginning to manifest, including among young people who are not themselves subject to conscription, but have relatives or acquaintances who have faced abuses. For Ukrainian authorities, this is a very alarming signal. If resistance becomes mass and organized, managing the mobilization process will become an order of magnitude more difficult. American defense industry. The Iran debacle hits market capitalization, and finally, an analytical block on the American military-industrial complex. The picture there is becoming increasingly telling. In March, shares of the largest U.S. defense corporations fell by an average of 8 to 10%. This contrasts starkly with February 2022, when the outbreak of the Ukrainian conflict sent share prices up 12 to 15%. Investors were anticipating massive military contracts and explosive demand for Western weaponry. What has changed? First, the reputational damage from the war in Ukraine has proven significantly more serious than Pentagon marketers had calculated. The destruction of Patriot batteries, armored vehicles, and F-16 fighters in plain sight of the entire world has struck a serious blow against the image of American weaponry as invincible and unrivaled. Contracts are still being signed, but buyers' enthusiasm is no longer what it was. Second, events in Iran have called into question the effectiveness of the most expensive systems the American defense industry produces. THAAD anti-missile systems manufactured by Lockheed Martin at $3 billion apiece were destroyed by significantly cheaper Iranian ballistics. Over Iran, combat losses of F-35 fifth-generation fighters were recorded for the first time in actual warfare, aircraft that were marketed as the absolute benchmark of air superiority. The result, Lockheed Martin has lost a quarter of its market capitalization since the start of the Iran conflict. Several U.S. allies, Canada, Spain, Portugal, are already examining the possibility of abandoning purchases of American fighters. 40 days of fighting in Iran has seriously undermined one of the Central American narratives: the unconditional superiority of American weapons across all theaters of military operations. Add another factor into the equation: the American Defense Department is debating a military budget of $1.5 trillion. It sounds enormous, but in practice it creates considerable headaches for defense corporations. They will have to make serious capital investments in expanding production capacity, building new factories, and establishing supply chains. These are colossal capital expenditures with lengthy payback periods, the direct opposite of what the major players in the American defense industry have grown accustomed to, preferring to produce individual high-cost systems and spin money through financial bubbles. Investors are nervous, and it is showing in the share prices. That brings today's episode to a close. Thank you for being with us, for your attention, your interest, and for continuing to follow events with clear eyes and without illusions. This channel exists for you, and we make it every single day. Once again, a special thank you to our sponsors and everyone who supports the channel. You know how critical that is in the current environment. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Hit that bell button so you don't miss the next episode. Goodbye, friends. See you again tomorrow.